Hi, I'm Justin Barrett. I'm president of Blueprint 1543. I'm a former university professor and a psychological scientist. And this channel explores how to think better, to live better as a sciencey person and a Christian. Today, I'd like to suggest a few thoughts for things you could do with kids over the winter or Christmas break to help develop their minds and bodies for the rest of their lives. Look, one of the wonderful things about the holidays is time off, and one of the curses of the holidays is time off. The kids is having time off anyway. If you're a parent, that is, or maybe you're a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle, and you know you're going to be spending extra time with kiddos. What are some things you can do with the kiddos so they have a wonderful break over the winter holidays, but you don't want to just plug them into digital devices and you know they're going to be watching plenty of Christmas specials and that sort of thing. So what's something else that they can do that's going to help, well, grow their minds, develop their bodies, their coordination, and just give them a really special kind of vacation, and maybe one that then actually bears dividends in the future down the road. And partly I'm inspired by the scientific study of happiness and what's called subjective well-being. Those psychological scientists who study the sense that I'm doing well, one of the clear kind of factors that they have found that promotes that sense of I'm really having a good time, I'm really enjoying myself, I'm really happy, is how much we ourselves put into a particular activity. So we can draw a contrast between those activities that we passively absorb, like watching television or scrolling through our social media, something that's very passive like that, versus something that's more active, where it takes a little bit of me, my agency, my initiative. Even though it's harder to do the stuff that requires little initiative, it takes more motivation, right? Well, that's that word initiative, right? I have to get myself going. It's easier just to flick on a TV and watch, right? Or flick on a computer and watch. But if we invest that little bit of initiative up front, it turns out research suggests that those more interactive, more demanding types of activities are actually more fun for us. We have more fun singing than we do listening to somebody else sing. We have more fun playing music than listening to somebody play music. We have more fun reading a book than watching TV, it turns out. All else being equal. That's what the research is showing. Okay, and it kind of parallels also this sort of biblical wisdom that if we take the talents that God has given us, the gifts, the interests, the abilities, and we invest those well, we enjoy God's blessings. And a wonderful picture of that shows in Jesus' parable of the talents. It's sometimes called from Matthew chapter 25. But with that by way of introduction, let me just give you a few very practical, straightforward sorts of suggestions of here are some things that you might consider doing with kiddos over the Christmas holidays. So if you're thinking indoors, well, of course, there's decorating. Decorate the tree with them, the mantles, the outside of the house, whatever they can manage to do. Sometimes it's just all they can really manage is putting those little hooks on the baubles or putting them on the tree, and then you're going to have to rearrange it later because they put them all in one place. It doesn't matter. It's engaging them, their agency, and their dexterity, their hand-eye coordination, and it's activating some of their sort of aesthetic sensibilities. And that can be fun and rewarding for them. Or maybe cut out some paper snowflakes. You know, that's kind of fun. You know how you fold the paper and stuff and then do certain cuts and, oh, look, it makes cool patterns and we pretend it's a snowflake. That's a fun thing you can do by yourself or with kids. Or foam ball snowmen if you've got the resources. So you can go to the craft store or the Dollar Tree or wherever and get those little, white foam balls of different sizes, and you stick them together with either glue or a toothpick, and then you'll glue little googly eyes on it, a little felt kind of scarf around the neck, make a little hat. You make them all cute, little faces and such, and that's fun. Or if you're really adventurous, try origami. It's a good time for a while for those who have the dexterity. So those are some of the more decorative types of things that you might consider doing with the kids. Of course, usually around this time of year, baking is a great thing to do. Now, this varies by skill level and sort of the age and responsibility of kids involved, but baking cookies, Things like chocolate chip cookies, for instance, is pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy. It is a collaborative type of activity for most kids, but it's really not that difficult. So it's an easy thing for them to get involved with. Or there's, of course, the famous sugar cookies, which you bake and then you can decorate, and that's a good time. Breads, there are many actually fairly simple bread recipes out there, including beer batter bread. That is really straightforward, doesn't require lots of working with yeast or rising and all of that other stuff, kneading and so forth. So it's a pretty simple, straightforward thing. I recommend looking that one up. But there are other things. I used to, as a kid, like making soft pretzels at home with my mom. That was a fun thing that I could look forward to year after year and made me feel like, oh, hey, I'm getting a hang of this baking kind of thing. And of course, for the more advanced players, there are things like pies and cakes. There's other kinds of food prep that kids at fairly young ages can actually start contributing to. You might think, oh no, kids, knives, this is dangerous. Well, yeah, there is a little bit of danger, but under controlled conditions, when they're taught how to do things properly, they can use basic kinds of shredders and even cutting tools if, with the right kind of supervision. So they can cut up veggies for veggie platters, or they can help prepare charcuterie boards, or they can make tiny little sandwiches for like English style high tea and feel very sophisticated doing that. And that sometimes doesn't require any sharp objects. Teach them how to use the microwave and toaster oven to prepare hors d'oeuvres. Or, again, for the advanced players, there's making roasts, washing and peeling potatoes, if you peel potatoes, and some of those other kinds of kitchen activities that kids can do actually at a very young age, and they can be empowered to do that. And they're starting to become comfortable in the kitchen, which is a lifelong skill that will save them money and usually deliver to them better nutrition than if all they're eating is prepared foods. So those are some considerations. We also tend to have more formal, fancier sit-down meals around the holidays. And so you might involve the kids in learning how to set a table properly. Where do the knives and forks go? Where do I put the different kinds of dishes and that sort of thing? Or the fancy napkin folding. That's a thing. Okay, you've probably seen those at banquets where you make like the bishop's hat fold, or the little flower holds, the lotus fold. There are all of these different kinds of fancy napkin folds that I learned as a kid. I thought they were pretty fun, and I imagine a lot of other kids would too. Of course, there's just singing and sing-along. Christmas carols are a wonderful thing to do this year. As I mentioned in one of the other videos, they bond groups of people together. They release endorphins. Collective singing can be a very powerful thing to do, as well as just a good time. There's playing games. Kids can start learning to shuffle cards at a fairly young age with the miniature decks. They need bigger hands for the larger decks of cards, but that's something fun they can do. And of course, you don't have to stick just to, the kid card games, but can move on to those that span kids and adults. Kids can do a lot more than we realize if we give them the opportunity. So maybe it's time to start teaching them games, trick-taking games like hearts or euchre or rook. But then, of course, there's always the old-fashioned solitaire, not on the tablet, but with real playing cards, and they can do that on their own. Dominoes, another great sort of traditional game that gets off of the digital devices. There's, of course, teaching them how to play the game, which can teach them basic numbers, counting, and adding. But then there's just building things with the dominoes, or building patterns and things and then knocking them down, and that's a good time. It can get loud, but it's a good time. Storytelling is a wonderful thing to do with kids this time of year. Reading them stories like A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, for instance. That's one we like to read in my house. It's a good one. A lot of kids, though, we know sometimes that's a lot to pay attention to. Let them draw pictures while they're listening to the story. One of the things that my wife has done with little kids in our orbit that is really effective is deliberately sets them up with like a clipboard and a piece of paper and drawing tools, and say, while I'm reading the story, draw whatever it is that captures your attention, that you can really imagine in your head, and just start drawing it while I read the story. And that can sometimes help them dial in and be more focused, and they're practicing their artistic skills too. If we're thinking about outdoor things, of course, there are plenty of things. There's playing catch, football, or baseball. Heck, teach them how to pitch a tent, have a little camp out during the day, if the weather permits, or even at night, whatever you like, whatever your environment can afford. But learning how to pitch a tent, not a bad skill. It's that problem solving, step by step, following instructions, and kids usually like tents. It's kind of fun. Then there's, of course, all the stuff around fire building, firewood, gathering kindling, stacking small fuel and large fuel, splitting logs if they're starting to become more able. And then, of course, what they can aspire to is working the chainsaw, but when the time is right. And then, of course, building the fire, how to actually build a little cabin style fire, or the more of the slanted teepee style fire. There are lots of different ways to build little campfires outside. And those are fun activities for kids too. Lots of kids love playing with fire. I mean, come on, who doesn't like playing with fire? And then, of course, there's cooking on the grill. That's not that difficult or dangerous depending on the size of the grill and, again, with the right adult supervision. And then there's the old standby, of course. Can we build a snowman? It depends on the weather, but that's a fun thing we can do with kids outdoors too this time of year. I'm just trying to give you a lot of different ideas to prime the pump for your own thinking about what are the age appropriate and kinds of activities you can do with kids that fit your budget, your weather conditions, your situation, so that you don't find yourself over the holidays stuck with kids indoors saying, I'm bored, and wanting to turn just to their digital devices. By now, you've probably caught wind that digital devices are really not good for any kids' heads, and the social media stuff is really not good for any of us. So if you're trying to encourage kids to get off of those digital devices and do something that's more engaging, that activates their minds, that helps grow them mentally and physically, hopefully I've given you a few ideas that you can build upon. Remember, we're happier when we're active contributors to our enjoyment instead of passively watching or just absorbing. Kids can do a lot more than we think, and they really can feel good about themselves when they begin to acquire these practical sorts of skills in which they can use for their lives and also to help out their families. So I hope these are some ideas that you can use. Have fun and have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.